Right, I'll just wait for some people to join, and we'll look to get underway. But thank you for joining us. If you're already here, the Evolution Exchange Agile and Tech Leadership got a fantastic lineup today to talk all things Agile, all things tech leadership, and some great questions in the offing. I'm really looking forward to this one. Just give it 30 seconds more. Let's have a look, see if people are joining. Yeah, there's people attending. Fantastic. I love it. Right, I think we'll kick off, guys. If you're ready to go, welcome to another installment of the Evolution Exchange podcast. Today, I'm joined by Jakob, Thomas, and Mads to discuss the topic of Agile in tech leadership. Before we delve deeper into the topic, let's work our way around the room with some introductions. Thomas, I believe you're going to kick it off for us.
Thank you, Sam. Happy to be here. So I'm Thomas. I'm been with Maersk for 12 years now. Started as a developer or software engineer, whatever you like to call it. Worked a lot with algorithms and data and decision support stuff. Later on, moved into a Scrum Master role, and from that into a team lead, engineering manager. So that's a bit of where I got my my Agile mindset from. I brought it with me from the Scrum Master.
Fantastic. Looking forward to this one today with you, Thomas. It's your second time on the podcast, and it went very successfully last time. Mads, over to you. Let us know a bit more.
Oh, thank you. So yeah, my name is Mads with a silent D. I work for a company that's making video management systems, so Milestone Systems, and I'm basically responsible for one of the feature teams, one of the units working on the core system. And yeah, my journey is basically from developer, Scrum Master, and then now engineering manager. Basically a bit like Thomas, so very similar. Yep.
Fantastic. And it's Mads' debut here today on the Evolution Exchange. I'm very looking forward to this one. So 2 out of 3 are Scrum Masters. Yeah, do you want to introduce yourselves? How are you going to get 3 out of 3 here?
I do have a Scrum Master certification somewhere. So my name is Jakob. I'm an engineering manager at Storytel in Denmark, better known as Mofibo. And I've been with the company for about 3 years in this role. I also have a developer background and a little different. I've spent a number of years working as an Agile coach in a number of companies before jumping on as an engineering manager.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jakob. Well, now that we've kind of established, a context around each of you, we'll work our way around the room and go through the questions and the reasons behind putting those questions and get everyone an opportunity to give their take on the situation. I think a good way to start off is always to give a bit of context around Agile. And I'm going to ask each of you now just to give me a bit on what Agile means to you. Jakob, will come to you first. You're closest on my screen.
Sure. So I've had a long career of things called Agile, and lately, the last couple of years, I'm starting to distance myself from the whole concept of Agile and the Agile community. And the reason about that is I think it's becoming a lot about process. It's becoming a lot about how you do things. And I think we are kind of we're forgetting the customer. We're forgetting the value that we're delivering. And so my focus lately has been a lot about how do we build great products? How do we create value for our customers rather than discussing how we estimate in story points or how teams are built or something like that. So it all comes together. And Agile to me is very much being able to respond to change and doing things with a good mindset. But it all comes down to building great products. I think that's the core of it.
Fantastic. There was a lot of nodding heads there on the screen. Thomas, we'll come to you next.
Yeah, I second that a lot. For me, Agile is a mindset. It's not a set of ceremonies or a framework, or either you use this framework or that framework, or that's not really agile. It's a mindset, and it's how you think about the problems you solve and the value you bring, and that you think about value to begin with, maybe. And actually, to prepare a bit for this, I also just picked up one of my favorite texts, the Agile Manifesto, and here, 20 years old, more than 20 years old, it still holds. Of course, it gets a little bit dusty. Some of it might be, we are better than now than back then, but it's actually not too bad. And I think that's actually a lot of the mindset. If you understand that and you can live that, then you got the right mindset. Then you can use whatever framework you like. It doesn't really matter that much. And I think it can be applied to all levels in an organization, which is often missed. And I think that's one of the problems with leadership and agile and leadership is that, but agile, that's what the team do, right? Now, then I sit here on my leadership position and do what I always did. Then it won't work. You have to have an agile mindset up in the organization also, else you're gonna get in trouble and you're gonna hit a wall some point in time, and someone needs to mitigate that, or you need to convert one way or the other. I think often, in my experience, one way of noticing the leaders that think they know agile but don't really, they usually say something like, "We work agile, and now we will work agile, and we will accelerate the speed exponentially of what we deliver." Stuff like that, right? I have a math background. Exponentially is really, really a crazy thing. Most people don't understand how crazy it is. I used to work with non-polynomial problems. It's crazy. Yeah.
I love
Fantastic. Go on, Thomas.
I love that you brought the math into this, Thomas.
Everything is about math in the end.
Yeah, exactly. I like that you pointed out the thing with like, then we're going to produce everything faster and it's going to go exponentially faster, right? But that's not what Agile does. It's more like showing you everything that is wrong, or a lot of the things that are wrong, or might keep you from reaching the pace that you can actually reach, right? But I should probably also answer the same question. And I thought a bit about this because for me it was kind of hard, because I think it has become so much of my own mindset that it was hard to answer. So for me, it's more about doing what makes sense in the situation, but also what makes sense for the people that are doing the work, but also for the users that will end up using the product in the end, right? And of course, the priority between the three different parts can change based on, well, the situation you're in, right? Does make more sense for the people that are doing the work, or does it make more sense for the people that will end up using the product? So it can be that the people that are doing the work wants to do it in one way because that might be the right way and it takes a long time. But if we don't have time to do that and we need to get it out to the user so they can actually use it, then it's about being pragmatic about some things. That's basically Agile for me. Yeah.
I love it. Thank you guys for kind of setting that context for everyone and what it does mean to you to be agile. Mads, I believe we're coming to your question next. What is the one thing that you see needs to change from being a traditional leader to becoming an agile leader? Before we let Jakob and Thomas dig their teeth into the question there, can you give us a bit of context?
Yes, it's because I've always found it interesting. Like they recently changed the Scrum guide, for example, so it was less tech oriented, but it's more like covering multiple areas of expertise, if you can say it like that, right? And so I find the part interesting whether you can apply Agile, not necessarily Scrum, in different departments, like where you don't necessarily see it traditionally, like finances, marketing, sales, whatever, right? And without knowing, I've never worked in departments like that. So I just made an unfair assumption that was more like traditional leadership, right? And yeah, traditional leadership for me is where you provide more guidance, direction, and motivation with the goal of improving the business precision and not necessarily so much about the people. Just to give my take on traditional leadership, at least very shortly. So yeah, that's my context for that question.
Fantastic. Jakob, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, so I think the short answer is yes, and there are plenty of good examples. I've been delving into this topic a few years ago, and there's a good examples. There's something called the Agile Marketing Manifesto that they apply. There is a big shift in HR around going Agile and working with Agile, and also having an HR department that supports the tech department in their Agile way of working and that mindset shift. You have beyond budgeting, which is really an Agile approach to budgeting. You have, I mean, there's a lot of these movements, and then of course depends on what you signify as Agile. But if you go further and talk about Kanban and Lean, there's a lot of applications in healthcare. There's a lot of kind of broader applications to how you would shift to a way of working with cross-functional teams, quicker response to change, and reducing WIP, etc., etc., etc. So I think that the short answer is yes, you can apply these, but you kind of have to create the flavor that fits the work that you do.
Fantastic. Thomas, have you got anything to add?
Yeah, I was thinking more of it I didn't think so much outside the tech box, to be honest. Sorry about that. But one thing I notice is that many Agile leaders, they like to refer to themselves not as Agile leader. I actually never heard that term before this podcast. But usually they refer to themselves as servant leaders. And I think that puts what is actually the one thing that you need to change is that you change from that you got people serving you to that you're serving someone, that you're serving people. I think that's maybe the one biggest change for most leaders, at least mental change. And some say, yeah, now I'm Agile leader or servant leader, but they actually didn't make that mental change. And I'd like to actually just throw one of my, what do you call it in English? In Danish, you call it kæphest. In English, you call it one of the things that I say whenever I get the chance, especially when I hear anyone talking about people as resources. Then I always ask them, so do you need another database? What is it you need here? Oh, you need people? Okay, then please talk about people. I don't understand the other resources. That is something that you allocate and you deplete. You don't do that with people. At least doesn't work in an Agile setup. And it ties a lot into that as an Agile leader, your role is to empower people to deliver. And as I said, I just refreshed a bit on the Agile Manifesto, and I think actually one of the principles actually says it pretty well with build projects around motivated individuals, get them the environment and support they need, and trust them to get the work done, the job done actually. And I think that actually entails the whole servant leadership quite well, and to some degree also, and how you should interact with people. Actually, one of the things that I hate the most about the engineering manager role in an Agile environment is that you got this mix of. I actually don't think the engineering manager always should impose anything Agile, because you got this conflict mix of that you're the leader for the people, right? That potential conflict, interest of conflict. That's why you usually would have a scrum master that should refer to somewhere completely different and can go in and take all the battles with this stupid leader, the stupid engineering manager that comes in and mess it up, right? But if you're that person, then it can be a little bit hard to have that self-insight sometimes, I think, at least for some people, myself included once in a while. I have no clue if anyone reporting to me is listening to this, but they could probably agree. But I wouldn't always know, right? I need someone else to tell me. Then I'll probably react to it. But I think another thing that's very important when transitioning leadership style is that for many people, you need to let go of some control you're used to have. You're not in control anymore. You're in control of setting the direction, putting out the playing field, maybe putting some borders and some directions and help. But you need to let a bit control. Trust them to get the job done, basically, right? You need to put more trust, and even if you think, oh, this could have been done better or something, if I did it, you need to maybe take a step back sometimes.
Yeah, just to jump in there, Thomas, I think Jakob's got something to add, and then I think Mads has as well.
Yeah, and I trying to build on what you're saying, Thomas. I think people have an illusion of control. It's you sit on hierarchical power, and you have an assumption that you have control, which you really don't. And I mean, back to Matt's original question is, I think you can apply these principles no matter what type of work you do, and drive the decision making to the people closest to the work, rather than having it sit with a manager higher up or something. It's about this empowerment and the manager being then responsible for creating the environment where this team can thrive, and being responsible for making sure that the team has all the knowledge and to solve all the problems that they're facing.
Yeah, exactly. The last podcast I was on, one of my main point was exactly that informal power eats formal power for breakfast. It's the team often has the informal power. You got the formal power as the leader, right? But if the informal power you have to earn, that you can never take, that's what other people give to you. And that's I think that ties a bit into it also here.
Mads, we'll come to you.
I might just be joining the choir here regarding the empowerment, right? Because I don't have the necessary technical background to make some of the decisions that might be needed for my team. So I am relying and trusting basically 100% on my team to make the right technical decisions. I've also told them that if it's something that they that affects their way of working, the last thing I want to do is to tell them this is how it's going to be. I want them to be in on the decisions. I want them to be in on having an influence on how it's happening. And I hope and believe that they both trust me to do that through the actions I'm actually taking, and also through the actions that they see that they're taking themselves as well.
Excellent, but great question there, Mads. I would like to move on to the next one. We're having a couple of questions fire in as well, so I do want to leave some time at the end to answer those. The next question is Jakob's, and after Thomas's, I suppose, points he made there about needing Agile and Scrum Masters, this is quite an apt question. Question is, what do we need Agile coaches, Scrum Masters, product owners for if we have great engineering managers that can coach people, be close to their team, and product managers that understand the product, have these roles come around in a way to fill gaps that in the manager's competence? And Jakob, will come to you to give us a context before going over to Thomas.
Yeah, so it's basically, I see it again, myself stepping away from Agile and the definitions of it, is, do we really need these roles? If it's about building great products, is it important that we have a Scrum Master? Is it important that we have a product owner? The flip side of this is, of course, are we asking too much of our engineering managers? A lot of this falls on their shoulders. So the question is basically, do we really need to have these roles in a team or in an organization for this organization to, I don't know, by any definition, call itself Agile?
Yeah, do we need an engineering manager to do that, right? I think
I believe we do.
if you have a team with an agile mindset, I don't think you need any of the rest of it, right? Agile coaches, scrum masters, they are for the transition period of making a great agile mindset a team, basically, right? A self-organized team, once you have that, the scrum master is part of the self-organization in the team, right? I would assume. It could be, right? You don't necessarily need that role specifically, right? Multiple people can take it. When the person is on vacation, other people take it. It's a part of the natural way you work. The same with especially agile coaches. That's a transition. That's a transition thing. It's if you need to make a transition, you go get an agile coach. That's Jakob, right? You've been in a lot of different companies as an agile coach, I assume. And a bit the same with the product owner. If the team know what brings value and is focused on the value, the product owner is there to make sure they will work on the most valuable thing, right? But if the team has the value mindset and the customer mindset, then you actually don't need a product owner. That's a product owner is a Scrum thing, right? You might not run Scrum, you might run Agile or something. I think in principle, all of these is there to support the transition into being in that state. And I don't know if any team ever get to nirvana state, kind of.
No.
And that's why we have all of them, including the engineering manager to some degree, right?
Yeah.
Why do you need a leader if you can self-organize? You probably don't. You take turn, or there's a natural leader in the team that takes the development of the others part of it. There's a natural architect in the team. There's a natural. Why do you need an engineering manager then? I would actually say that I'd much rather have a company that are full of teams without engineering managers than companies that are full of engineering managers without teams. So, right, it's not the engineering manager that creates a lot of stuff. It's actually sometimes the engineer has to be a bit careful not to get in the way of the value creation, right? And I think that's sometimes more the task of the engineering manager than the opposite. So I don't. You kind of put the agile coach, scrum master, and product owner up against the engineering manager, but I actually think they are part of the same group in this context, to some degree at least, right?
Yeah.
And I know it's not black white, right? And so, but to some degree, I think we are closer to being a mix between an agile coach and an architect and we have people leadership, right? Developing of others. Product management, I also got quite a bit of that in my role because I like it, right? But we got a lot of different hats we can put on, right? And but I also see engineering managers only use half those hats because that's what they're good at. And that still works, right? Because then they get support from others, or the team take care of some of the rest of it. I'm not sure an engineering manager is that needed when it comes to it. It's just
I disagree with that, but
Awesome.
I think that there is a need for, not for these roles necessarily, but for some of the competences and for some of the things that these roles do, and whether that hits an engineering manager or a product manager or whatever we call it. But I think there is a necessary to have somebody that focuses on the space and the system around and has that freedom. And at the same time, I think it's a bit naive. Yes, self-organizing teams, absolutely. I've never seen that in practice to the extent where I've heard about it. I've never actually observed it of a team that could go there. And of course, it's not a team never stays in one state because the environment around them change.
Yeah,
people quit,
exactly,
people,
yes,
and they move back and they move forward, and things keep changing. And sometimes they need that external forces to, get them to improve. And sorry, Mads, wanted to let you into this as well.
Yeah, that's fine. But I'm kind of annoyed when you're saying what I want to say.
Sorry about that.
No, I also see that the engineering manager is needed, or at least some kind of role that is taking care of the people development, right? And also taking care of maybe some of the more administrative tasks without being a secretary as well, because that's you can probably do cheaper, right? That's something you can probably do cheaper, definitely. But I mean, it's guidance, also keeping people the team on track, so they're not just going out on a tangent. Like how is the joke with the guy that had to change a light bulb um, in the fridge or something like that, and then the door squeaks, and then he ends up going to the garage for some oil, and then he can't find the oil, so he goes to go to get the car keys to go, and then the car won't start, and then he, like you can end on a tangent where you're getting away from what you originally had to solve, and where if you look at the Scrum Master role, then it's more about facilitating the process, and you have the product owner to facilitate that we're actually working on the most important things. And if I can just contribute or try to answer the question as well, then the question focused quite a lot on Scrum with the Scrum Master and the product owner, right? And I really like, Thomas, what you said about you don't have to run Kanban, you don't have to run Scrum, right? You might run Agile, and just because you implement Scrum or you implement Kanban or whatever, it doesn't necessarily make you Agile. If you don't manage to change for the environment or follow the requirements that might come in.
Absolutely.
And it's very simple, like also doing a sprint. If you just take Scrum and you're like, oh, but we have started the sprint already, so next time we can shift the work is when the sprint ends and we have planning again. But then you have already lost the Agile focus, right? And now I might be going on a tangent as well. But yeah, yeah, what did I say here? Yeah, so I think the most important thing you can do is like coach the people, right? And one of the reasons I'm sitting here today in this company is because they had the right culture, like that is basically people first in almost everything we do. So it's both for the product, it's for the culture here, it's how the leadership is, and we are actually doing it. That's impressive as well, and it's something I enjoy because I like the people. I don't necessarily like the tech. That's for my people to do that, right? Yeah. So it's about facilitating. Yeah.
Excellent. Jakob, I know you've already jumped in to talk for Thomas, but have you got anything else to add?
No, I think, unfortunately, I think we're pretty aligned. This conversation is more interesting if we're disagreeing, but it is really again back to the value creation, back to the focus on the product and creating something for the customers. I put out the question there specifically around because I don't think we need these roles. I don't think you need Scrum. I don't think you need to follow this process to be able to deliver, but you can't lose sight of what you're actually trying to do and what you're actually trying to build. And our customers really don't care. I mean, our customers really don't care if we have product owners or if we're running this or that method, or if we are running waterfall or a sweatshop, whatever, as long as we're delivering good software.
And probably also that they get it on time, timely.
Definitely.
They might care if you're running a sweatshop, right? But
they might. If they actually look into it, they might. Yeah. We are not, by the way, but
good to know.
Excellent, guys. Well, Jakob, thank you for that question. Moving on to Thomas's now. And he's gone for a bit of an inverse. I'll let him describe the context in a second. But what can a leader do to make an organization less agile? Mads, we'll be coming to you first after the context from Thomas, so no one will be stealing your answers this time, mate.
Yeah, so the context of this is to switch it a bit around. Try to explain what does it mean when I think of an agile leader. I also think of an agile organization. I see it as there's a relationship between them. So what, as a leader, if we describe what can you do to make your organization environment less agile, it also explains something about what you can do to make it agile, maybe. So it's about turning the mirror around and see how does bad look like, how does good look like, then on the other side of it.
The first thing that popped into my head is, of course, micromanagement, right? But there's many other ways to killing agile in an organization. I have seen leaders say that, oh, we are agile here, but if you wanted to change the process, you had to change it for the other teams as well. And that kind of kills the way of doing what makes sense for the team and what like gives the best opportunities both for the individuals to like perform, but also for the teams to reach their full potential together. And if you're in a setup like that, I think you have, I don't know, killed it from the beginning. I haven't seen the next example, and I hope I never will, but I've read about the like kind of seagull management, if you can say it like that, that is flying in, shitting all over the place, and then leaving again, and the team is just like, what happened? And that could be like, I don't know, dictating ways of doing things, coming in and telling specific people to do. So basically jumping in with a bit of micromanagement, and after they have just done that, then they're gone again and can't reach them and you can't see them, they're just gone. And yeah, that was what I could come up with, just like out of my mind. Yeah.
Good examples. I got this one with the team and the processes. I remember at some point in time, I don't remember, maybe 3, 4 teams maybe, and all teams was running 2-week sprints instead of one team that run 3-week sprints. And it was also, I told them, right, it's a bit annoying you're running 3-week sprints, but you know what? I'll defend your right to do it for the end, because it worked for them.
I was about to say, but for how long should a sprint be? Like how long should it be?
Until it ends. You define that when the sprint starts, right?
Well, you should.
No, but I think
ideally you should keep the same cadence, right?
In my experience, then it shouldn't be too long. If you most teams that have a long sprint, they usually do it because we don't want to have all these ceremonies. So if we have longer sprints, we have less of it. We have less planning meetings, we have less retros, we have less of all this stuff, and we can get some work done. That's at least.
I disagree
that's
with
often
that.
what
I think.
Yeah, but I completely disagree as well, right? Because it's hard to plan for a sprint, right? Or something like that. We spend so much time planning. If we have longer sprints, we spend less time planning. And I'd say no. It's if you find it hard to plan for a 2-week sprint, a 3-week sprint is going to be even harder, and it's going to be even more time, and you're going to be even more annoyed along the way, right? So maybe you should try with 1-week sprint then.
So at Storytel, or at least in the department where I work, we are running a process it's similar to Shape Up that they from Basecamp, that actually takes into account we work on missions, and we run for a mission for 6 weeks, and then we have 2 weeks of cool down, and then we run another mission for 6 weeks. And in that mission, some of the teams iterate in 1-week cycles, some of the teams iterate in 2-week cycles, some of the teams don't have any of that. But they run for 6 weeks. And I think what I'm missing here in what you're saying, and moving away from the question a little bit, but I really think the alignment is important. If you are running at a scale, if you're running a bigger organization, you need that alignment. Where are we going? What's the direction? And it doesn't really matter if it's 2-week sprints, 3-week sprints. You can leave some of those decisions. You can push those decisions down to the teams, to whatever works in their contexts. Maybe we have apps and we are dependent on App Store, and hence there's a dependency over here. and we can release to production 50 times a day, so we can iterate in another way. But you need the alignment, because if you are running at scale, if you're running multiple teams, you need to go in a certain direction, and you need to be able to gather the teams in that direction. And I saw Mads waving a hand here. I'm going to give you the opportunity.
Yeah, but now I can't remember it.
Then I take a look. It actually
yes,
wasn't
please.
that. It actually wasn't that big a problem. We still coordinated. We every quarter we kind of made a high-level plan with dependencies of what do we need to coordinate along the way, and we just did that between the teams. And sometimes with a bit of annoyance that, oh, okay, I forgot your team didn't start and stop the same. Sprint doesn't start and stop the same hours do, but it wasn't really a blocker for most things.
Also, it's important that the sprints are long enough for the teams to be able to deliver something of value. So,
yes. So
if it's
2 days is probably a minimum.
Well, it depends on the context, right? What does your team need to be able to deliver a valuable increment of that software? Yes, 2 days is very short, but I think also 2 weeks is it's hard to create something that is that meaningful. Again, depending on the context that it is. And sometimes it's also one of the things that we're discussing a lot is we can ship software. We can ship software every day. We can ship increments of software multiple times a day. But where does the value come in? Where do we start the A/B test? Where do we gather the information about what our customers are doing with this piece of software? Whether we reached an outcome, not just the output, and how do we iterate on that? And that usually, I mean, that takes longer than 2 weeks. You need that feedback cycle, and you need to incorporate that in the way of working. And if you're only running 2-week sprints all the time, you can lose sight of what that bigger flow is.
It's definitely a luxury. It's definitely a luxury to be able to release multiple times per day. We can do it a couple of times per year, but that's for some completely other reasons. But the important thing is that the sprints are long enough for the teams to be able to deliver value, because if they can't do that, then they will have a lot of like feeling of failing a lot of times before they maybe have one feeling of success. And we talked a bit about the sprint lengths as well. I see it as important to at least have a checkpoint once in a while where everyone is saying, yep, we're still alive, and yep, we're still working towards the same product. We haven't decided to make vans instead of making houses in this team, so we're still making houses. I think that was
maybe just to actually right now we have a setup where the teams completely decide for themselves more or less, and some teams are running 2-week sprints, some are running 3-week sprints, some are running Kanban. Some are running Kanban, and then they came up with this concept of having task forces. So they're running Kanban in general, and then they have a task force doing something. It's a little bit like your missions, I think. These kind of, then they focus on one specific sub problem, and focus on that side of it, while the rest of the team in general is running Kanban. And we just coordinate along the way still. I don't think it actually impacts a lot in the coordination. It's a little bit like our approach to releasing is also we release when we got something new. It's not about if the sprint ends or if it's some weeks we release, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 times in a week. Other times there can be multiple weeks between. It actually depends on if there's something new to release. That's the trigger of it, rather than anything else actually.
But isn't it hard then to get that feedback loop of what you've built and if you're going in the right direction?
We are actually spending a lot of time here in the autumn. We spend a lot of time setting up all the data collecting to get that feedback loop. And now we have just had 2 weeks where we forced some of our users to do extra work to give us extra feedback. Now we are analyzing that and starting to realize, oh, this is what we need to do. This is what we need to do. Now we need to be a bit careful not to try to do all of it, and figure out, okay, what is the best to do, and put some more angles to it, put more data to it if we can. That's actually quite important. And then, okay, that's actually a long time to do an increment. I completely agree with you, because we haven't done an increment in that time. But hopefully the increments will be really interesting. And then we're going to measure the outcome again. And I think you have a really good point about the value and outcome. It's actually one of the major differences between, I think, if you want to go back, if we go back to the question a bit, if you want to make sure that your organization is not agile, then you make it into a feature factory.
Yeah.
Then you make sure that you deliver feature, and they deliver them faster and faster. And you also make sure that you measure all the individuals on the velocity, right? Number of line of code produced, and maybe number of bugs that they fixed, right? That's a feature factory, right? You could also maybe just support their growth and learning from the level they're at, right? And you, instead of focusing on the feature factory and you could focus on the outcomes and give them the responsibility of the outcomes, actually. And instead of giving them the responsibility, a feature factory, that's the inputs for the outcomes, right?
I think I want to get back to also answering your original question. I realized I never did that. And it's, I think the job of an engineering manager as it's set up today, it's hard. Like, being a good engineering manager is hard. And I think it's hard not to step on any of those, step into any of those holes of killing an agile mindset. I think the worst thing you can do is disempower the team and take away their autonomy and take away their freedom to act. Yes, you need alignment. So you need some structures and you need some guidelines, guardrails, if you will. But just telling the team, feeding them with tickets, having decisions made elsewhere, that I think kills it. And then, of course, as an engineering manager and upwards, you are responsible for the environment. And if the environment doesn't allow the team to experiment, doesn't allow the team to improve and learn from the feedback loops, if you isolate them from those feedback loops, there will never be any chance for them to iterate and improve things as they go.
But you also have the opposite one, right? So you could say, okay, there's no limits. You just decide everything. But if the team is not mature enough for this, then nothing is going to happen. Nothing is going to change, or everyone is running in different directions. And then you're missing the alignment again.
Yeah, you need to set the playing field, right, where they can run within, and then a goal.
But I think, Mads, I think you're onto a point here of, it requires a certain seniority of a team. You need this knowledge in a team. Like, you can't take 5 students straight out of school and then expect them to be able to iterate on these things, because they simply don't have the experience and they don't have the context and they don't have the knowledge. So for this team to work, I mean, that's another great way of killing it, right? Making sure not the right people are on the bus, and then things won't work. They will fall apart.
But you can also still have all the right people and say, you go. But if they don't know each other, if they haven't like found each other, been through the forming, norming, storming, other way around, I don't know, I don't remember. But then if they're not at the right spot, then they're also not mature enough to be able to make decision for themselves. But at least they are, but maybe within a bit more stricter frame than what you would have if you have a more mature team.
I think that's a great point to end on there. Mads, I do want to leave a bit of time. We've got a couple of questions come in. Thomas, I believe one of the people that you may know, she said, good to see you, is Tanya Gorbo-Novic. I apologize if I butchered the name. She wants to know from you guys, seen from your chair, how can HR use Agile or Scrum, both as a methodology and a mindset? Thomas, since it's to you, we'll start with you and then work our way around the room again.
Yeah, so Tanya used to be my HR partner some time ago. So how HR could use it? I think in my impression, then HR has a little bit maybe the same setup as we actually have, and now I might be corrected, but there's a lot of you have the same process you keep running through, right? You are doing some recruitment and you're doing the months kind of and the year kind of have a pace. At this time of the year, there's the salary review. At this time of the year, there's this process going on, and so on. So that you can put into an agile mindset, and the whole put an agile structure down to that. If it's Kanban or if it's Scrum or something else, I think. But then you also got these. Now we got a problem over here. There's some firefighting also, right? It's a bit like our box, I think, right? While the others, and maybe also start to questioning about get the value into it sometimes. I think in HR you often do projects. Then we, for example, just had a big project where they changed the way we evaluate people. So instead of doing a direct evaluation from the manager, we're actually not evaluating people anymore. We are gonna instead focus much more on how do you develop people, which I think is awesome because it fits much better with what I actually do. I didn't fit that nicely into the old system. But that's a project to change that, and it's a change project and so on, but you don't, and there you focus on the value and the outcome. But in these continuous things in HR, you kind of forget what is the value and the outcome sometimes, and it gets a little bit mechanical. I think you could use some of the agile mindset to actually get the right angle to some of these ongoing things.
Excellent. Mads, what's your thoughts on this?
I think Tanya's question came during my like setting the stage for my question, and I don't think I would ever implement Scrum in an HR organization, but there might be some other agile processes that could fit in without knowing too much about how the work is organized in an HR organization. But I do reckon that, of course, I also see some of the processes there, as Thomas mentioned, the salary review process, the hiring processes, but how I would do it, I don't know. That might also have been why I asked the question.
It's a great point. And Jakob?
Yeah, so first of all, I'd point to, there is actually a lot of work done in this area. There's a whole movement called Agile People, and also there's a book out, there are user groups, and there's also a movement around Agile HR and how you approach it. It's much more focused on how you create that environment. I mean, HR to me is some of the people that the business partners or some of the people that work on the system that kind of fits around it. How do you do comp and ben in this area? How do you do appraisals? How do you make sure that a manager can empower the team and make sure that the team can make these decisions and be accountable for it, and then support these managers? I mean, some of them have a long journey to make of being able to trust the team and being able to understand how these things are. But there is definitely a lot that has to shift from an old way of working to allow teams to be able to make decisions, iterate, and make sure that they have the tools that they need, that they can make these decisions. And in many organizations, HR stand in the way of this. So I think it's that mindset shift. And then, of course, going on the process side, I strongly believe that you can apply Lean and Kanban to almost any type of work that you do, and you can visualize your work. There are some of these principles that you can apply to almost anything. You can work as a cross-functional team. HR can get much closer to the actual teams they work with, etc. But there is a lot written and discussed about this topic.
Yes, also
thank you, guys.
Transparency is also a key thing I could imagine for HR, right? Because everything HR works with is by definition GDPR and secret to some degree, at least for some people, right? Usually, most of the things you work with, right? So how do you build transparency into that? How do you make a transparent, anonymous that anyone in the company can go in and see this is HR's what are they working on? What is are they behind? Are they all this? Can you keep up in a constant pace or stuff like that, and make that visible also in the organization, right? That's maybe one of the trickiest things for HR. I just realized. Now, since I was working with Tanya, which was a very good experience. It's not that long ago we worked together, and since I had two new HR partners, and each time it was a different way. I think that also ties into it some knowledge sharing, build more knowledge and the learning culture. I also connect learning culture and Agile to some degree, because when you do Agile, it's very important that you got some kind of learning culture, I think. That could probably also be an aspect of it that would be good in HR. So it's not just these handbooks and SOPs and stuff like that, but you actually also share what's a good way to support people, what's a good way to support the leaders.
But that also comes down to preference, right? There would also be a change as soon as you get a new manager or leader. There would be a change, even though there might be a handover or not. Then there will be a shift in how things are doing. So I don't see that much of a problem in the change of how they're working, how they are approaching the managers they're working with. Definitely not. But yes, there should be some kind of it's more than just SOPs and processes, and it's again about people. This HR.
Yeah, and you had a good point about being in control, Tanya, that HR is supposed to be in control. That paralyzes.
Well, yeah, Tanya, I hope you got what you needed from that, and I hope you've enjoyed the whole live. We've got plenty of questions flying in. I'm going to try and go in order, but if there's any questions that aren't answered on this, I'll make sure the guys have visibility, and if we can get some answers from them, I'll definitely post them on the comments on the page and when we do the post as well. We send out a newsletter here at the Evolution Exchange to tell people about our upcoming live podcasts. And we ask people to come back with questions, and this is one of them. And Jamie's told me that how do you convince internal stakeholders to give Agile another chance if, for example, they've failed with the implementation in the past or have never really believed in it in the first place? Jakob, we'll come start with you and go in that reverse order.
I think it's the wrong question. I think you will fail trying to convince a stakeholder that we should work Agile. Or that if you failed with an implementation of Agile, you're in really bad position to do anything like that. I think what you need to do is you need to, again, start focusing on how do we create more value and what are some of the things that we need to change, and then start changing that. I think it's a fallacy to believe that we're going to do an Agile transformation and then change everything all at once. Rather, you would have to, focus on how do we shorten the feedback loops? How do we work in a cross-functional team? How do we make sure that our organization is supportive of empowering a team, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I really think that if you would try to go to your stakeholders and try to get the permission to do an Agile transformation, your stakeholders should probably say no.
Interesting, guys. Have you got anything else to add, or should we move to the next question?
Maybe just one thing, right? If it's hard to convince something about it, you need to show it. It's the only way to do it. It is to find a team that can do it and show how it flies off the ground. That's one way of doing it. And else, I think what Jakob also was saying, right? You don't have to call it Agile. You could just take the principles and they make sense, right?
So it comes down to maturity, because when you tried the first time, the organization, the team might not have been as mature as it is today. So just because it didn't work half a year ago, it might actually work today. That's one of my catchphrases when people are saying, "Oh, we tried this before." Yeah, but it might work today.
Yeah. But now you're running DevOps, and that's actually a major enabler for working Agile. And now there's a lot of enablers that if you don't do automated testing, it's really hard to be Agile. also, is in my experience. So
Yeah.
all these enablers, you can start working on those without, and then you can say, now we're ready for Agile. But you don't need to call it Agile along the way necessarily, right?
Fantastic. And we'll get to the next one. We've still got 5 minutes, which is great. Apologize in advance for the name that I'm going to butcher here, but Zieko is looking to ask a couple of questions in one here. So is Agile development less suited for teams of a certain size, perhaps a startup or 2 or 3 friends working on it? And is it possible that following some of the Agile development frameworks is going to result in less productivity in the early stages? I think we'll stick with those 2 for now. If we can get to the rest, we will. But yeah, Mads, we'll start with you this time.
Well, for the team size, yes, definitely, because the more people you are in the team, the more communication lines you need to create alignment. So the more you are, the larger communication pile, we can call it, you have. So, but of course, putting down a Scrum process on 2 people, that doesn't make sense either. And there's like a sweet spot between, I would say, 4 and 7 people tops, something like that. That's where I would say the sweet spot is. And yeah, I believe that the bureaucracy should never be larger than actually doing the work. So if you see that whatever framework or process you decide to use is actually giving more work than the actual work you're doing, the value you're creating, then you're not doing the right thing. I hope that answered the 2 questions.
Yeah, Thomas, Jakob, or Thomas, we'll come to you first. Have you got anything to add?
Yeah, I usually think teams size, it depends on bit on what you do, but for software development, not less than 3, and preferable around 6 plus minus 1. 7 is also a good number. More than 7, it starts to be overhead, is my experience. Then about Agile, if that is gonna more productivity. If you're a startup, are you gonna be hindered by Agile? And I think it depends a lot on it. Scrum might hinder you a bit, but I think it's if you talk, Jakob talks a lot about value, right? And that's exactly what you do in a startup. It's actually the core of it. I think Agile and startup, that's a perfect match, right? And the same is also you need to focus on making a minimal viable product all the time. You can always get smaller. That's actually one of my learnings, is that you can always cut a bit out of it and figure out, okay, what is the least value you can actually give. And just to return back to the Agile Manifesto, I just read it, right? So I need to I got excited about it again. And one of the things in that actually ties a lot into this whole with the startup, and so is the principle about simplicity. The art of maximizing the amount of work not done is essential. This is exactly about the whole MVP thinking, and that if you can argue for with the work you shouldn't do to create value, that leaves you with the core of the value, right? And focus on that, and focus on what, if you need to code something to realize, oh, I shouldn't, this is not giving value. If you can, the earlier you can get that insight and actually cut away the work that you have to do, that's really core of it.
Just quickly, Jakob, will come to you, and then Mads.
Yeah, so very quickly here, I don't think you need anything called Agile in this environment. I think it's a startup has this perfect capability of, you have a small team that know each other, that have a shared goal, that have the ability to make the decisions that you need and pivot very quickly. I wouldn't put any of these processes in place until you really feel the pain of having a structure. And instead, I'd focus on things like XP programming or something else that helps you be productive and do the right things and work together as a team and have the visibility of what you're doing.
As we've got about 20 seconds, do you want to leave us on a final point?
Yeah, I just wanted to put the emphasis in, especially the startup environment, to like put an emphasis on the inspection and adaptation, because I imagine that's definitely what you have to do in that situation.
Thank you for listening, guys. I mean, we'll carry on and just round up here for the people that are going to be listening on the podcast. I think I just want to thank everyone, really. Mads, Jakob, Thomas, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the live podcast today. I hope you have enjoyed it, and I hope to see you back here again on another topic. If anybody listening would like to get involved with one of the upcoming podcasts, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn or email me at sam.williamson@evolution-nordics.com. We'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.